Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, urged NATO to build a coordinated presence in the Arctic to prevent quote-unquote interference. The policy document pointed to Russia's renewed focus on the Arctic, including a buildup of its military presence there. It also highlighted China's efforts to raise its Arctic profile as a self-declared near-Arctic state, noting growing interest in the shipping alone in the northeastern sea route and closer ties to Moscow that extend into military cooperation. Now, she wasn't the only person that came out with a statement very similar to this, where they were mainly just focusing on increased NATO military presence in Greenland to specifically counter Chinese and Russian influence in the region that could potentially influence or even overthrow Greenland in the future. Now, I came out with a statement on my last podcast addressing this. It's not only Meloni stating that they're doing this to build and increase NATO military presence in Greenland, but they're specifically doing that to deter China and Russia from their efforts at increased presence in the Arctic. So it wasn't just her. You also had I believe he's the Prime Minister or President of Greenland, after meeting with a community of European officials who had agreed to send troops to the region. He came out in a statement basically saying this exact same thing. And in that statement, he said that they were doing this to, quote-unquote, quell American concerns of Greenland's security. Now, it was my thought that perhaps Trump was really doing all of this talk of militarily invading Greenland so that NATO would step up on its end, as it's not willing to step up to, whether it be their own defense budgets in their own countries or abroad in a region like Greenland. I thought that Trump was doing all of this in order to get these European countries to send troops and military equipment to Greenland to protect it from a potential Chinese or Russian effort to take over that massive island. Now, recently, it seems as though that's not the case, but I guess, you know what, just to kind of push that to the side, I'll get right back to that. One of the major updates, and this is sort of what I titled as being the main story, I guess it was a little bit clickbaity, so I apologize. This just has to do with our United States interest definitely needing some form of increased military or financial security over Greenland because to deter Chinese and Russian influence, because you just a day or two ago had Mark Carney, who is the Prime Minister of Canada. He did meet in Beijing with Xi Jinping. They signed a number of deals seen as a breakthrough in relations between the countries after a couple of frosty years. China said that they will lower retaliatory tariffs on Canada, specifically related to rapeseed products, to a combined rate of approximately 15% down from 100%. Canada said that in return, they would allow up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into the Canadian markets at a preferential rate of 6.1%, also down from 100%, which is what it was at before these talks. Other agreements include cooperation in energy and agriculture and in finance, were also made during that meeting. So not only do we have to worry about Chinese presence and influence in Greenland, but now with people like Mark Carney, we also have to worry about Chinese influence in Canada. And it wouldn't necessarily seem like that on its face when I read that to you. You know, China's upping its amount of electric vehicles that it can send to Canada. Canada's now able to send rapeseed products, which is their main thing that they were talking about there was canola oil, because Canada doesn't produce shit other than canola oil and fucking maple syrup. But you also have in these agreements renewed cooperation in energy and agriculture and finance, which I'll get to in a second, but agriculture specifically. Let's look at America, for instance. We allowed China to start buying up farmland all across the United States. Well, what did they do when they bought up that farmland? Every single bit of that farmland was strategically placed next to military installations, U.S. military installations. Never mind the fact that they have literally Chinese government-sponsored police forces within America in major cities like New York City to fight against political dissidents of Chinese nationality. Well, now they're going to be investing in agriculture in Canada. So they'll obviously be buying agricultural land next to strategic military installations of the Canadians. Now, Canada doesn't really have shit for a military to begin with, certainly not by American standards, perhaps by global standards, but not by American standards, because they know that America will protect its hemisphere. We just recently also had U.S. senators and representatives who are stopping the sale of U.S. farmland to China. You also had some states, some representatives and senators within certain states that are outright banning China to allow that property whatsoever because, again, it's next to critical military infrastructure. Well, all they did was just move north now. So now China is going to start taking strategic positions with the farmland that they buy while simultaneously making deals on finance. Well, what do they do financially with every country that they do financial deals with? Let's look at Africa, for instance. They make these huge loans that basically indebt the countries that they're lending to indefinitely to China, and a lot of those deals include them selling Chinese equipment, critical infrastructural equipment, to those countries that inevitably have back-ends and workarounds that the Chinese government can access at later dates. So if they're selling them critical equipment for their energy grids, critical equipment for their oil fields, whatever it may be, all of this electrical equipment that they will be selling, that they will be financing, will have workarounds that will just be another layer of the security process that we have to worry about in the future. So that was a huge development insofar as the Carney and Xi meeting went, and it really just reinstated the necessity to me that we do need to have control of Greenland. Now, how we're going to do it, frankly, I don't know. Because, again, as I was stating earlier, you had people like Giorgia Meloni and, well, I'm trying to think of who it would be, the King of Denmark, I suppose, coming out and stating that they were doing all of this troop movement and military equipment movement into Greenland, specifically to deter China and Russia. But one of the strategic parts of them moving those troops into that region, into that country, is that the United States now is more than ever deterred from any sort of actual boots-on-the-ground military intervention.